I want the world of theatre to be more like lucid dreaming. I want the theatre world to be more like entering our dreams, our hopes, our desires without literally expressing them. I practice music as the way to enter the reality that is not reality. The reality that is like a dream with his own language, with his own narration. I think text is also a music. It's not only what you say, it's the particular vibration which is coming from your heart or from your understanding or from your experience. The main thing about the inspiration, the story that I take, is that somehow that story must be connected to my life situation here and now. Big part of the performance is that nobody is more important, nobody is less important. Everybody is equally important because performance is the star. My first company that I worked with, called Grzegorz was placed in the east of Poland. And east of Poland was full of very small villages, cities, towns, full of different minorities. So we used to travel to those villages because apparently there were lots of traditional people, traditional songs, traditional dances, traditional storytelling. And this is how the company was operating. We created performances based on traditional music, traditional customs, traditional rituals, and so on. And about 5.5 years later, I left the company and I formed Song of the Goat, together with another member of the company, which was Anna Zubrzycki. And for about now 17 years, we were expanding our activities, not only to try to reach Polish minorities or minorities living in Poland, but we were traveling actually throughout all world, searching for small communities that have something in particular, that have a tradition, that have a music, that have a ritual. And somehow we were a little bit like anthropological pirates. Normally you would say you inspire yourself, but I think we often stole a little bit of the music, chants, incantations, dances, just to feed ourselves. What kind of theater is possible if it's not a mainstream theater? In the early 90s, I met this group of amazing Tibetan lamas who fled on exile from Tibet into India and then into Europe. And they have some kind of I would say, secret knowledge about how the human mind works, how the human heart works. And from them, from particularly one of them called Akong Rinpoche, I received the teachings on coordination. And coordination, it means that every acting tools we have, such as voice, rhythm, imagination, emotions, energy, all of those things we integrate together. And it's a little bit precisely like in indigenous culture. If there is a ritual in indigenous culture, it is not just a form of performance. It combines everything. It combines society, their needs, their desires, their dreams, their necessities, and so on and so on. So coordination is a little bit like creating within the small group of ensemble people is like to create a small world of rituals, of togetherness, of sharing, exchanging. That's why I work with international people. That's why we travel and we learn from different cultures. We take music, we take sounds, and we turn it into our training, which is called coordination training. I use music and songs in a performance for two particular reasons. One is, in the 6th century BC, there was a Greek composer called Kritailos. And he said, if in ancient Greek language, if the word is an energetic equivalent of an object it signifies, then the music shows you a hidden reality. So that's the one thing. Music takes our imagination into hidden reality. Another source of my inspiration, musical inspiration, is of course Friedrich Nietzsche and the tragedy born out of the music. Basically, these two sources I combine in order to not be only a rational, only psychological, only pragmatic here and now. I practice music as the way to enter the reality that is not reality. Music allows me to be very, in a way, archetypical. So I go for something that is representative for many, many people, like a shared, like a common dream. If you look into, let's say, the language, non-verbal language of animals, you can hear that they express things, they inform each other about the things, they give messages without words, because in the vibration of their language, of their sounds, is a hidden information. And this is how I approach the language. I very much believe, and I hear it with many people, with actors, with performers, with singers, that it's not only what you say, it's the particular vibration. That's what I'm interested in a theater, vibration of the language. On the beginning, there's an inspiration, which is text, story. Not necessarily the linear story, but just a story that is touching. Somehow it is not just chasing after what's interesting, what's new. It's just I have to identify that I'm at a particular time in my life and I need to talk about King Lear. I need to talk about the destruction of the kingdom through human pride. I need to talk about rulers who are proud, arrogant, they demand love, but actually they don't give anything in return. So there comes a moment in my life when I think, okay, that's now time to talk about this. So this is the first stage. Then, instead of reading and analyzing the play word by word, which I can do, I am looking for the biggest dramatic tension in this play. And then I talked to composers and I said, look, these are the main dramatic figures, these are the main dramatic tensions. Would you like to compose a piece of music that represents this? And let's try to search for it. And they start composing, they start writing and searching for the music that would represent this. And then also I start researching some words, lines, dialogues, monologues, and I see what kind of emotion is embedded in that story.
This is not Leah! Does Leah walk like this? Does Leah talk like this? Where are you?
And then I look for the rhythms, and then I look for the gestures, and then I look for the energy of this. And in the end, I try to combine all these elements together. So what the result is something very non-linear, something that is very energetic, something that, like one academic professor used to say, the ritual doesn't have to have a logic. The ritual needs to have a sense. So what I'm looking not for the logic, I'm looking for the order of things that makes sense.
Several years ago, I was in London to Tate Gallery to see the Kandinsky's retrospective exhibition. And I really liked that exhibition for one particular reason. On the beginning of the exhibition, there was one small painting of a landscape, of the Kandinsky's landscape, home village. And then throughout different years of Kandinsky's work, this image slowly transformed through surrealism, through Dadaism, through different cubism, different forms, until in the end I saw a picture that if I just saw this one, I would have no idea where this comes from, why, and what it means. But because I saw this first one, that so-called inspiration, I understood what he wanted to show in the end. So the landscape of today's performance is a King Lear by William Shakespeare. But it's only a landscape. You won't see the linear story. You will see a series of poetic events, musical poetic events. You will see something that we call the drama of music. This is what we're working on recently, the drama of music, in Polish dramat muzyczny.
I'm kind of a director that is always watching rehearsals of my colleagues from the audience perspective. So I'm not a director who is trying to accomplish some kind of my own dream. I'm trying to make a performance that would satisfy the audience, that would give them a profound, a touching, a significant experience. Most of the we say material from the rehearsals comes from actors, not from me. So we do a lots of exchange. They produce, they invent, they improvise lots of material themselves. And then it's my job is to pick up something which is significant, which works, which is interesting, which is beautiful, which is touching, and orchestrate this. I try to orchestrate and I try to create a structure of the performance in such a way that the spectator doesn't have to think. It is he or she is immersed in action, and it's precisely with eyes, with ears, with attention. It's following the action precisely where we want them to go. I very often talk and say to my colleagues, actors or students, as a performer, you work with audience attention, you work with audience imagination, you work with audience feelings. You're not only creating the structure and fulfilling the structure of the performance. No, you must be aware that what you do is somehow representative for the audience feelings, experiences, emotions. And this is what we're trying to work with, is that we understand that ultimately theater you do for audience. You not do theater just for your own sake, just for your own ambitions. You do theater to uplift audience from a somehow little lower stage of experiencing the life into the little higher stage of experiencing the life. We make theater for audience to become more sensitive human beings. Which is, I know, it's very strange to say, but I think that people come to theater in order to feel better people, in order to feel more sensitive, more experienced, touched. In 2012, my company, together with our performance Songs of Lear, we won several beautiful prizes during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. We got the Fringe Verse, we got the Herald Archangel, we got a special musical awards. And after those prizes, Robert McDowell, the proprietor and the patron of the Summer Hall venue, approached me and said, would you be interested, would you consider making a project based on Scottish music or Scottish tradition? And initially I felt very resistant. But then a friend of mine, the Tibetan Lama, Dr. Akong Rinpoche, he heard the conversation, and for some reasons he smiled and he said, you should do it. You should do it because maybe it's worth for Scottish people to see how other nations, Polish people, other people from other nations, how they see and how they're understanding their huge, very deep and profound tradition. So then I said, okay, I'll take the project. And we call the project Return to the Voice. And the project is basically more like a concert. We go onto expedition, and then we also go to the Scottish Musical Archive in Edinburgh, and we listen music that was recorded in 40s, 50s, 60s of the 20th century. Very old, beautifully recorded music. And then out of this, we did a selection of about 30 pieces of music that I felt had a particular power, and they are very different to what normally you would hear nowadays as a Scottish music. So then we started analyzing this music, this ancient or this old music that we found in archives and from people. We start analyzing this music together with two composers, Maciej Rychły from Poland and Jean-Claude Aquaviva from Corsica. And we say, okay, what do you hear in this music? What kind of influences? Because there's no pure tradition. Every tradition has some kind of influences. I'm sure you find it in Persia too, that the Persian music is influenced by this, by this, by this, by this, and it's never really, you can't say there is a beginning purity, nothing like this. It has its own identity, but it's different. So in Scotland, we've felt it's pretty much the same, that this music has been influenced by many different sources, but because it stayed in isolation for centuries, it contains its own dignity and identity. So then we started doing something which is absolutely ridiculous for the Scottish music. We started making it as a multi-voices polyphony. Scottish music is one melody, is one voice. But we somehow, as a theatre, we gave ourselves permission to be just inspired. So what we do, we're not continuing the tradition, we're not cultivating Scottish tradition, we're simply being inspired by this incredibly rich world of the Scottish music, and especially Gaelic music. There is no linear story, there is no play that supports, but every song contains a very particular story. Every song we chose is related to the very powerful part of the Scottish history. So that whole concert production may be a little bit like taking people through an incredible landscape, historical landscape of Scotland on the level of human emotions. First of all, I think that I'm more a teacher than a director. at least somewhere deep in my heart, I think I really prefer to teach than to direct. And especially nowadays in Europe, in UK, in Poland, I feel there is a hunger for understanding. And remember, it's not just the movement that you propose to your partner. You propose your imagination, your feelings, thoughts. I think that the contemporary acting went so far into commercialization that we somehow lose a purpose, a deep, significant purpose of acting, where the performer is a little bit like a shaman. It touches energies that no one else can touch. And I like sharing this. Me and my other practitioners from Song of the Goat Theatre will give people opportunity to train with us and to experience acting more. Everybody ready? Acting is about knowing yourself better and better and better. So in its principle, it's a very, I'd say, spiritual way of working, because you have to know and get to know yourself better and better. Because if you work with your feelings, if you work with your emotions, so you have to be able to properly explore them and to know how to use them, how to release them, how to not fake them, or even if you're faking them, how to make them so real that the audience would never say, oh, she's faking the emotions. No. So I think this is what we try to give people, opportunity to just broaden and expand their acting experience. And also part of the task of the school is to encourage students working together with us to create their own projects, to create their own ensembles. Because I think if you are waiting for somebody to employ you, you might be waiting many years. And my experience is the sooner you start your own work, the sooner you are well equipped to create your own work with your fellow colleagues together, the sooner you'll be successful. About 12 years ago, the mayor of the town, I'm from Wrocław, asked me, could you create a festival that makes sense? It was very surprising request. Could you create a festival that makes sense? It means that most of the festival, they don't make sense. I wasn't really sure what's behind the request. Until I went to Mexico. I took the similar path as Jerzy Grotowski before, trying to find the Tarahumara Indians. And because Tarahumara Indians influenced in early 20s and 30s the European theatre through the activities of Antoine Artaud, very famous French writer, philosopher, director and actor. So many people later, many directors would undertake the same journey to the sources of theatre, which is Tarahumara in Mexico. I went to Mexico and I didn't meet Tarahumara Indians because the World Bank built motorways across their territory and they were pushed away from their natural seatings. And that was quite shocking experience for me, because what I could see was the children of Tarahumara Indians selling some kind of toys to the tourists on the banks of the motorway. That was quite shocking experience. And then I met a man, Randall, who formed a foundation to help children of Tarahumara Indians not to escape, not to leave their tribes. He created a foundation to help children stay in the tribes and at the same time get a proper civilized education, so that they can be between the worlds without losing the one. And about 20 years ago, maybe more, Randall organized this foundation, and because lots of drug traffickers were also hidden in the Tarahumara Indians territories, out of 6 people who created this foundation together with Randall, 4 were shot by the drug traffickers. And I looked at the man who was still trying to help children of Tarahumara Indians not to abandon their traditional way of living. And I thought, my God, this man is incredibly courageous and brave, because although all his friends, nearly all his friends, were shot, he's still continuing the work. That really touched me. And I came back to Wrocław and I said to my mayor, I have an answer to your request. What kind of festival makes sense? Let's dedicate a festival towards people who, by giving their whole life to protect children and traditional culture, they may be under the threat, they may be in danger, they can't do much, but they do something in order to protect our human sensitivity, our human fragility, our human heart. So anyway, we decided to create something that is called Brave Festival. And we bring marginalized cultures in danger, cultures under the threats. We bring them into Wrocław and we give them space to, so that they talk about themselves through the music, through the art, without any politics involved, without any religious involved, just because I believe that every culture is equal. Every person is equal to another person. And that the art and the culture is a perfect way to manifest and to show it, that there are no better people, no worse people. We can respect each other, we can feed off each other, we can learn from each other, we can confront our habits and our prejudices, but in the end, we're all equal, and this is what we should practice, that equanimity.